Hello guys, welcome to the next session of developing console-based banking application using Java programming language. So in the last session we discussed on introductory part of this particular series, and in this session we are going to work on one functionality which is a login functionality. So today will be the first session in which we will be starting writing some programs for this series. So in this session we will look into how we can write one simple logic so that we can log in into a system. Before directly jumping into the today's topic, let me just first of all tell you the points that or the concepts that you will get from this particular session. So in this session, you will get some knowledge on static blocks in the Java. Then you will get some knowledge on collection frameworks, like we will use some collections like a list or a set maybe. Then you will get some knowledge on that as well. After that, you will get some knowledge on dot equals method, like why we use dot equals method. And then lastly you will get some knowledge on stream APIs also. So these are all the concepts that we are going to learn in this particular session. So now let's see how we can start working on this particular project. And also all the dedicated points or all the concepts that we are going to see in this session, we have dedicated videos. You will see all the links into a description box, so you can just check them out. Let me just first of all use the IntelliJ. If you are using Eclipse or any other IDE, then that's fine. We have to just create a new project. So let me just use a file, then new, and then project. And then over here we have to just choose a Java version. You can just choose a Java version, maybe 1.8 or any upper version than the 1.8. Maybe I'll just keep it as a 1.8. So don't use any version less than the 1.8, because we are just going to use stream API, and maybe like we are going to use Java 8 features. That is the reason we require the Java version at least JDK 8, right? So let me just choose the version, and let me just choose the project as a Java project in the left hand side section. Let me click on next, and then over here let me just click on next again, and then we have to give the project name. Let me just give the name as bank underscore application, something like this. And now let me just click on finish. Now once the project is created, what we have to do is we have to first of all create the different packages. Now you must be knowing that what are the packages. So in the short terms, like packages is nothing but a folder itself. So it will help us to differentiate all the classes interfaces that we use in the application by their uses. So we can just create some different packages, and we can just create different classes and put those into the specific packages based on their uses, right? So let me just quickly tell you how we can create the packages and what do I mean by exactly with the help of uses. So let me just click on src, right click, and then over here let me just click on create new package. Now over here the very first package that I'm going to create is a main package. Obviously by the name you can just get that whatever main class we will create, that main class we will create under this particular package. But before that, one thing that we can just do is, instead of directly creating main package under our src, we can just do one thing. We can just delete this particular package, and we can just create it something like this. So let me just create it as a com.youtube.bank, something like this. Let me just create this kind of like folder structure, and then inside this particular bank package let me just create a new package called as a main, something like this. Now we have created one package, that is main package. Let me just create one more package. For example, let me just give the name as an entity. So in this entity package, what we are going to store is, we are just going to store like all the entity classes or model classes, right? Because we are going to create some model classes. So we are going to store those model classes into this entity package. You will get some idea in a moment. So just create the package as of now. Let me just create one more package over here, which is having the name as repository. Okay, so inside the repository package, what we are going to do is, we are just going to create all the classes or interfaces which are related to the database operation, right? So right now I just said that we are just going to like store all the uh, interfaces classes which are related to the database operation. But in the last session I said that we are just going to uh, develop the console based application, and in the console based application we don't have any kind of databases, and we don't have any kind of user interfaces also. So over here then if we are not going to use any databases, then why we are going to create a repository, right? So databases are mainly used to store the data, right? So as of now we don't have the databases, so we are going to store all the data into the collections, right? So all the logic that we will write related to the storing data and retrieving data, that will be purely on the collections. So all these kind of classes, all these kind of interfaces we will be writing into the repository package. And one more package that I want is, I just want a service package. So let me just create one package, that is a service package. Now why we require this service package? So in the service package we are going to put all the classes and interfaces which will contains the business logic. So what do I mean by business logic? So sometimes let's suppose you have to process some data, right? So let's suppose if you are just taking some bulk data from the databases, that logic will go into the repository package. Then once you fetch all the data, let's assume you have to process that data, you have to like write some processing logic, maybe some filtering, sorting logic, kind of these kind of logics. So all those kind of logics we have to put into the service packages. So basically this like filtering, sorting, or maybe any kind of processing on a data, we basically call it as a business logic, and these kind of logics we have to write into the service packages. So that is the reason we have to create a service package also. So as of now we have created 4 package: entity, main, repository, and service. So let's create one new class inside the main package. So let me just create new Java class, and let me just give the name as main itself. So let me just give the name as main itself, and let me just create that particular class. Now this is going to be a starting point of our application. So what do I mean by starting point? So from this class we are going to run our entire application. So this class is going to be a main class. So that is the reason we have to implement, or we have to write a main method inside this class. So let me just use public static void main, and inside the brackets we have to give the string args, that is string arrays arguments, right? And now over here let me just do one thing. Let me just write some logic so that we can take username and password from the user, right? So as I said in the very first in the very few seconds, we are going to work on login functionality. So for the login we require a username and password, right? And that username and password we are going to take it from the user as an input. So we have to write a logic for that. So to do these, let me just do first of all let me just do one thing. Let me just include a scanner. So why we require scanner? As I said, we are going to take username and password from the user as a user input. So that is the reason we have to take this scanner. So let me just do one thing. Let me just make it as private scanner, then scanner is equals to new scanner, and inside the brackets let me just pass it as a system.in. System.in basically means that we are going to take input with the help of the scanner. Now we have imported the scanner and we have created one object for the scanner. What we have to do is we have to now take username and password from the user. So for this, let me just do one thing. Let me just first of all write one sysout, and let me just give the message as enter your username, and after this message we have to take the input. So what we can just do is we can just create one string variable which is having the name as username, and we can just make it as a scanner. We can just make it as a scanner dot. Okay, now over here why we are not able to access the scanner? Because we are trying to access this from the static method, and obviously this scanner is as of now non-static, so we cannot access non-static from the static, right? So that is the reason, let's do one thing, let's make it as a static scanner, something like this. And now let's try to assign access the scanner. Yes, we are able to access. So over here, let me just make it as a next. So for this scanner also we have different methods. We have next, then next line, then next int, next double. So we have different methods. We have to choose method based on our data type. So as of now we are going to take input, like take string as an input. So that is the reason I'm just using next over here. If you are going to take suppose int value, then you have to use next int, something like this, right? But as of now we are just going to take a string, so that is reason let me just keep it as a next only. And similarly, once we take the username, let me just add one line for a password also, something like this. Now once we are able to get username and password from the user successfully, then first thing that we can just do is we can just write some s out again, and we can just first of all verify that we are actually able to get the username and password. So we can just write username and password over here. Let me just try to print this username and password so that I can actually guarantee that we are able to get input from the user. Now let me just run this particular class and let's see whether we are able to get the input or not. So as of now it is asking me for the username, so let me just make it as an admin, and for the password let me just make it as an admin. So yes, if you just see, we are able to print username and password, right? Which means that we are successfully able to get username and password from the user. The next thing that we can just do is we can just write a logic so that we can just verify this username and password. So before writing the logic, we have to first of all create some data, right? Because with the help of this username and password, we are going to validate against the data. So that is the reason we have to create the data, right? So to create the data, let me just do one thing. Let me just go into the repository package, because as I said, all the data related concepts or all the data related logic we are going to write into the repository. So let me just create a new Java class and let me just make it as a user repository. Now inside this user repository we can write all the logic. So first of all, let me just do one thing. Let me just create some collection. So why we are using collection? Because there might be a multiple users, because if we have the banking applications, then there might be the multiple customers into that application, right? So that is the reason we have to create a collection which will store the multiple users data. So that is the reason we have to use a collection over here. Now to use a collection, we have different options. We have the list, then we have the set, and then we have the map also. So list we can obviously use to store multiple objects. Set also we can use to store multiple objects, but there are some differences between the list and sets we will discuss in a moment. And map also we can use, but inside a map we have to store a data in a key value pair, right? And I think key value pair will not be a good choice for storing the users data, because we are just going to create some users and we have to just add it into the add it into a collection. So we don't have any kind of option over here to store users in a key and value pair. So that is the reason we are not going to use a map over here. So now we have two choices. We have the array list and we have the set. Inside the list and set, there are some differences. So inside the list, we can store duplicate values. So that is the very first difference. Inside a set, we cannot store duplicate values. So this is the major differences that we are going to highlight over here. So now why I am just highlighting this particular differences, because we are going to create users, right? So we are going to create some username, passwords, and we are going to store contact number and account balance also. So username and password mainly. So these, for like every single user, these username and password are going to be different, right? So we don't want the duplicate username and passwords to be stored into the like that particular collection, right? So over here the main thing is we don't want to store a duplicates inside our collection, and that is the reason I'm just going to choose a set over here. Why set? Because set doesn't allow the duplicates, list allows the duplicates. That is the reason list may not be a good choice over here. So that is the reason let's use a set over here. So inside this, let me just use private, and then let me just use a set. And now for this set we have to use a like we have to give a data type, like what kind of uh, set or what kind of objects that you are going to store inside this set, right? But we haven't created any like model classes. So first of all, let's create one model classes, because I'm just going to store the user details inside this set, stay inside this set. That is the reason first of all we have to create one user model. So let me just create, right click on this entity package, new Java class, and let me just make it as a user, something like this. Now let me just put some few properties over here. Let me just first of all make it as a private integer, and not integer, let me just make it as a private string username, then private string password, and let me just put private string contact number, then private string role also, because role is also very important, because we might be having the admin account and the customer account. That is the reason we have to take one key which will store the role. And then lastly, let me just make one double variable to store the account balance. So let me just create one variable for account balance also, right? Now we require some getters and setters, because these are the private properties and we will not be able to access directly from outside of the class. That is the reason to set the values and get the values we require the getters and setters. So let me generate the getters and setters, something like this. And now let me just come to the user repository, and let me just give set of user over here, something like this. And now let me just give the name as users is equals to new. And over here again we have options like hash set and linked hash set. There is only one difference, like hash set basically doesn't take care of the insertion order, where linked hash set takes care of the insertion order. So it will, linked hash set will maintain the insertion order. So as of now I don't think like we require the insertion order. So that is the reason I'm just going to choose hash set over here, something like this. Now over here this particular users set is as of now static, as of now non-static, right? So we have two options, either we can keep it as a non-static, or we can keep it as a static. So how we can choose it, right? So we can make it as of now the user set as a static, because this is going to be a set in which we are going to store all the users data across our banking application project. So this is going to be only one set in which we are going to store all the users data, right? There is no any other collection in which we will store all the user data. So this is going to be common for all the application or for throughout the application. And if it is common, then best thing that we can just do is we can just declare this particular property as a static property. So why static? Because if we mark it as a static, then only one copy of this particular set will be created for entire application. So it will help us to manage the application. So let's make it as a static only, something like this. Now we have this static set, but as of now this particular set is empty set, right? Because we don't have any options, or we don't have any users created, and we don't have any users inside these users set. So first thing that we have to do is we have to create some couple of users so that we can insert them into a set. at least we have to create an admin account, because whenever like first time we will run the application, we will not be having any data into this set, and if we don't have any data into this set, then we will not be able to log in into the system, because this is not a, we are not using databases, so we are not going to store data permanently. It will be just temporary data. So that is the reason, if like we start the application, at least we want some data to proceed with, right? So that is the reason we have to create some users, and we have to insert those users into this uh, like set by default. So how we can do this? So if you just see, we have the users set, which is a static set, right? So we, if we want to initialize any static property, then the best option that we can choose is a static block. So how we have to write a static block? So we have to just write a static, and then we have to just give these curly brackets. This is going to be called as a static block. Now what is static blocks, what is its use? So static block is basically used to initialize the static members of the class. So inside our user repository, we have the static member that is called as a users, and if you just want to initialize it, then we have to use a static block. Now again, the next important point is static block will get called only once. So it will get called only once. So if you have used a constructors, then constructor gets called every single time when the object is created, right? But static block will get called only once. And if you just ask me the question like, if we have static block and constructor both, then which one will get called first? Then the answer is static block will get called first. And once static block is called, then and only then constructor will get called. So inside this static block, let me just create few users. So let me just create few users over here. User1 is equal to new user, and then we have to just put user1 dot set username, let's suppose admin, then user1 dot set password as an admin. Now before writing the next lines, let me just tell you one thing. As of now, we have created one user. We are creating one user, and we have to like, if we just want to assign the properties, then we have to like assign it as a set username, set password, and maybe set role, set contact numbers. So like if we have 5 properties, then we have to write 5 different lines over here to set the values, right? But we can just save our 5 lines. What we can just do is we can just use a parameterized constructor over here, which will help us to create user in a single line. So let me just create a parameterized constructor. So how we can do this? We have to just right click, then generate, and then constructor, and then we have to choose a properties that we want to initialize from the constructor. So I just want to initialize all the properties. Let me just select all these properties, and let me just click on OK over here. Now let me just save it. Now as of now, we are getting one problem over here, but let's tackle those particular problem. So now as we have the parameterized constructor, we don't require these setters, like we don't have to set values like this. Instead what we can just do is we can just pass those values inside our constructor. So for the username, I'm just going to pass admin. Then for the password, I'm just going to pass a admin. Then the third property that we have is contact number, then role and account balance. So for the contact number, let me just pass some random values. For role, let me just pass the role as an admin. And then for account balance, so as this is the admin account, we don't require any account balance. So let's put as a 0.0. Now similarly, this is going to be admin account. We require one customers account. So let me just make it as a user2, and let me just give the username as a user2, password as a user2, and maybe let me just change the contact number a little bit, role as a user, and let me just give the account balance as a 1000. Okay, and let me just create one more user account, that is customer account, and let me just make it as a user3, and similarly let me just give the username as user3, password as user3. Let me just change this contact number a little bit. Role going to be user only, and account balance maybe we can change it to the 2000. So we are just going to assign some initial values, and these initial values we require because we are not going to store data permanently into a databases. So that is the reason once we start the application we want some data to be created so that we can play with the application, right? Now we have created all the users. We just want to insert those users into our users set. So let me just make it as a users dot add, and let me just put user1, then similarly user2 and user3, something like this. Okay, now we have added different users over here. Okay, so next thing that we can just try is we can just first of all try to print these particular users. So we can just check whether our users are getting added or not. So how we can do this? We can just go to the, first of all we can just write one method inside this particular class itself. So we can just make it as a public void and then print users, and then what we can just do is we can just use system.out.println, and we can just print users, something like this. Now we want to call this particular method. So how we are going to call it? We are just going to call it from our service. So this is going to be a bit confusing, but I'll just explain you in a moment. If you're new, then obviously this is going to be a bit confusing, but I'll just let you know in a moment. Inside service, let me just create one new Java class, and let me just mark it as a user service. And then inside this user service, let me just add one new method, that is public void and print users. Okay, now inside this print users we want to call a method which is present in our repository, user repository. So how we can call? We can just create one new object like private user repository. User repository is equals to new user repository, and then we can just make it as a user repository dot print user, something like this. And now inside our service we have the print users method. This print users method from the service we can call it inside our main method. So let me just go inside the main method, and let me just make it as private user service. User service is equals to new user service, something like this. And let me just make it as a, so yes, we can't use private over here, so let me just skip it as let me just remove that private, and then let me just make it as user service dot print users. So now let me just first of all run this application, and I'll just explain you what we did over here. So let me just run the application, and as of now let me just put some username and password. So as of now if you just see, we are printing this set values. So as of now we are getting the three objects which are added inside the set, but we are not getting any data over here. So we are not getting any data printed over here. Instead it is just printing the object references. So if we just want to print the data, what we have to do is we have to just go to our entity class, and over here we have to override the toString methods. So let me just right click and generate and toString method. Let me just select all the variables, and let me just click on OK over here. Now whenever we will implement or override a toString method, it will basically give you the string representation of your object, and that is the reason whenever now we will run the application, we will be able to get data printed on the console. So let me just put some data like this, and now if you just see, we are getting the data printed on the console. So we have this particular user, then we have second user, and then we have a third user also. So this is what basically toString method basically does. It basically provides you the string representation of your object. Okay, now the next point that I just want to highlight is, if I just go to the user repository, but before going to the user repository, let me just quickly explain you what we did. So we have this main class. From the main class we have created object for the user service, and inside the user service we have the print users method. Inside the user service we have created object for user repository, and from the user repository we are calling the print users method. And if you just see inside the user repository, we have this print users method where we are actually printing all the values. Now the next point that I just want to explain is about dot equals method. So let me just copy this and let me just try to paste it over here, and let me just give the name quite different, and let me just put it as a user 4, something like this. Now very initial stage, in very initial stage I just said that whenever we use a set, then set doesn't allow duplicate values, right? But as of now, if you just see, we have this user 3, like if you just compare this user 3 and user 4, we have the duplicate data. So like if you just go with the definition of set, it should not allow this user 3 and user 4 to be added into the set. It should allow only one among it. Maybe it should allow user 3 or user 4, right? So let's see, if you just try to print the data now, so what it will do and whether it will allow or not. So now if you just see inside user 3, so if you just see this particular username is user 3, password is user 3, and again we have this particular user. If you just compare these, like we have duplicate values inside a set, so that means our set is right now allowing the duplicate values. We can prove that by seeing the output over here. But we have already seen that set doesn't allow the duplicate values, right? So why then we are able to add these duplicate values? It is basically due to, like, set is not able to identify this user 3 and user 4. Like it is not able to identify that they are different values. It is not able to identify to compare those values. So set is what set is considering, like set is considering this it as a completely different object and user 4 as a completely different objects. So that is the reason it is allowing to be it is allowing us to enter these two objects inside a set, because it is like treating them as a completely separate object. It is like treating it as a completely two different objects. So that is the reason we are able to add it. But now if we just want to compare the objects based on some properties, and if you just want to tell the set that compare the objects based on some properties, and if those properties are different, then and only then if you just want to insert it inside a set, then we have one option that is called as a dot equals method. So again, how we can just use that dot equals method, we have to just go inside our users, and then we have to generate, and we have to click on equals and hash code. So now let me just click on a next, and now over here we have to select all the properties. So what are the what kind of properties we have to choose over here? So you have to choose those properties on which you have to compare the objects. So I want to compare object on username, password, because obviously this is going to be different for every single user. Then contact number, it might it is also like contact number is also different for every single user, so we have to keep it. Then for the role, yes, so we don't have to choose a role over here, because like if we have the customers, if we have the multiple customers, then all the customers we might have the same role, right? So that is the reason we have to uncheck it. And account balance also, like multiple customers can have the same account balance, that is the reason we have to uncheck it. So we are going to compare our object on username, password and contact number. Now let me just click on next over here, and let me just click on next. And non-null fields, we can just keep it as it is, and we can just click on finish over here. Okay, now let me just save these changes. Let me just come back to the repository. So over here we have the username. um, if you just compare user 3 and user 4, we have the username, then password, and then account, username, password, and a contact number, right? So these three should be the different. So now let me just run the application. Let's see whether now it allows the duplicate values or not. So now if you just see, it is not allowing the duplicate values. One thing that we can just do is we can just change the user name for user 4 and for user 4, and here also we have to change little bit. And now let me just save it and let me just run it. So now it should allow all the duplicate, it should not allow the duplicate values, and it should like work as expected. So yes, now it is working as expected. So this is how the dot equals method help us to like avoid the duplicate values and to compare the two different objects. So till now we have created the set, we have created some users inside the set. Now we have to just write a logic to to log in into the system. So what we can just do is we can just first of all come to our main class, and over here what we can just do, we can just create a one simple method. So what we can just do is we can just go to the user service class, and inside the user service class what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create one method that is public void. As of now let me just keep it as a void. In a moment we are going to change the data type, return type. Let me just give the name as login, and for login we require the username and password. So let me just take two arguments like string username and string password like this. And now what we have to do is we have to just pass this username and password to our repository. So again what we can just do is we can just go to the user repository, we can just create one new method that is public. As of now let me just keep return type as a void, and again let me just give it as a login, and inside the login we have to just give it as a string username and string password. Now what we have to do is we have to check whether this particular username and password is present into our set or not. So there are again two different approaches. We can again use a normal for each loop or for loop, and then we can compare, and or else we can just use a stream API. So let's use the stream API over here. So how we can do this, we have to just use users dot stream, and then we have to use a filter over here. So we have to write filter. So again the filter basically takes a lambda expression or predicate expression. So how we can write the predicate expression, we have to just like simply user, then we have to like use user dot get username dot equals, we have to pass the username that we have received, and then we have to make it as and user dot get password dot equals, and then we have to pass a password, something like this. So again this is nothing but a lambda expression. We have already seen about the lambda expression. All the dedicated links are in the description box, you can just check them out. So let me just quickly tell you, in the lambda expression, like inside the filter we have to pass a predicate. So predicate is nothing but a functional interface, and functional interface is an interface which contains only one abstract method. So this is a like, you can just simply say that this is a uh, implementation for the predicate interface. So this is, you can consider it as a implementation for the predicate interface. And lastly we have to collect the result as a list, collect result as a list. So we can just write it as a to list, something like this. And now we can just store it inside some list variable. So let me just make it as a list of user final list is equals to something like this. Now let me just break it down. Now we are able to, at the end we will get some list over here by filtering out with the help of username and password. And if we have to just check, like if final list dot is empty, so if it is not empty, so we have to write a not over here. If it is not empty, then we have to return final list dot get, and we have to get the 0th index. Why I'm just writing 0 directly over here? Because we have make sure that we are not be able to allow the duplicates, and that is the reason at the end inside the final list we will get only one data, and that one data we are just directly returning from this particular method. Okay, and we else if list is empty, then we have to return a null. So we have to return null, something like this. And now over here we are getting some errors. So this is why, because we have used a void as a return type over here, so we have to change it to the user. Now our login method is done. We can just go to the user service and we can just do one thing. We can just use user repository dot login. We have to pass username comma password, and this login method is going to return us a user. So we can just directly return from that from our this method, like whatever user repository login method will return us, directly we will return it as it is from our user service login method. So as of now again it is complaining. This is why, due to our return type is void. Let me change it to the user. Now our service method is also completed. We have to just go to the main method, and over here we have to just use user service dot login, and we have to pass username comma password, and we have to just store result into the users object, something like this. And then what we can just do is we can just check if user not equals to null, then we can just say it as you are logged in successfully. You are logged in successfully. Else if user is null, then we have to write login failed, something like this. And now let me just save these changes and let me just start the application and let's see what happens. So let me just make it as admin, password as admin. So yes, you are logged in successfully. Let me just restart the application again and let me just put some random values, and login failed. Again let me just restart the application and let me just put some user 2 like customers ID. Yes, you are logged in successfully. So we are able to log in successfully into the system with the help of valid username and password. And if we enter invalid username and password, then we are getting the expected message, which is login failed. So this is how we can implement the login functionality. So I know that the session was very long and like we did a lot of different things, but again we have learned a lot of concepts also. So like I hope you enjoyed that particular concepts. So if you still have any questions, let me know into a comment section and I'll just try my best to help you out in that case. As of now we have learned only the login functionality. We are going to implement all the remaining functionality in the upcoming sessions. As of now we don't have any logout functionality, so that is also we are going to take care in the upcoming sessions. If you still have any questions, let me know in the comment section and I'll see you in the next session.